Hello and welcome to John and James. My name is John Hastings and with my co-host, Mr.
James CeeLo.
And today's special guest, we have psychologist, sophrologist, which I've never heard about. I'm interested in that. And human performance specialist, Lindsey Francis. Welcome, Lindsey. How are you today?
Welcome.
I'm great. Thank you, John. Thank you, James, so much for having me on the show. I appreciate it a huge amount.
Excellent. Are you in France or are you in the UK today?
That would be telling. It is road bike season, so guess where you think it might be. Ski season's over, snow's gone, bikes are out, and I'm about to go to Spain for a week. So that's really exciting.
Beautiful, beautiful. So our topic today was about change psychology and pretty much AI adaptation, but we'll float around and talk about life and all of the challenges that are going on at the moment and the challenges you're seeing with your clients, Lindsey. So first of all, if you'd like to give us a bit of a background about yourself and how you've arrived on the John and James live show.
Absolutely. Well, through the power of LinkedIn, of course, here we are. And I suppose when I start talking about why I'm here, it's important to talk about what my mission is. And my job is to wake people up to what's actually going on in their mind and their body, and then use data to help them change that physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So there's a lofty claim. Would you like me to go on as to how I arrived at this point?
Absolutely.
Yes, please. Let's start early. Should we start as early as childhood?
Well, we could, because actually the story is quite funny when you start tracing it back as an entrepreneur. Why am I sitting here now doing this sort of work?
Yeah.
And my parents will laugh and they'll say, well, it's because you've been saying why since you could talk. And I've been asking myself and anybody else who'll listen why people do what they do since as soon as I realized that I wasn't the same as everybody else. In fact, the realization that we're all unique is probably something that's been life-changing to me. So that uniqueness and why do we do what we do and why are we not the same? Or is everybody different? Am I just different to everyone else? Or what's going on here has really been my life's work. And I've come to the conclusion that, of course, we're all totally different and uniquely made. So therefore, we have to chart our own path in life. Now, that's easier said than done, of course, especially in the world of social media, where I'm continuously looking at other women who are 50 and look amazing, thinking I must be like them. And then I realized, no, I must just be me. So it's daily work. And the introduction of wearable health trackers a number of years ago and biometric data really changed everything. So I have been through a very interesting career journey, leadership development, business consultancy, and psychology. And here I am now practicing a discipline called sophrology, because I am based or have been based in France and Europe and work with a very international clientele where sophrology is known extremely widely. If you're in Switzerland, France or Spain, it's available on prescription. There are sophrologists everywhere, but unfortunately it hasn't made it very far out of that area. Sophrology, I might as well tell you now, if you're sitting on the edge of your seats, waiting to hear what magic bullet this is an incredible blend of tools and techniques that's been around since the 1960s. It was designed by a neuropsychiatrist in Spain, and it's a beautiful combination of many, many different visualization, breathing, meditation, and gentle body movements. Combined in a personalized way, it transforms people's physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual experience. So there we have it. I hope I've done it justice. Back to you.
Very good. And I've never heard of it. Have you, James?
I had to look it up, I have to say. So why is it then, Lindsey, that it hasn't made it outside of Switzerland, sort of mainland Europe? Why have we not heard more about it in the UK? Are we just too repressed? Are we too British to sort of think about this kind of woo-woo subject potentially? What is the reason in your experience?
Well, there's been a language barrier, of course, and then you have the issue in Europe of protected professions. So in terms of qualifying English-speaking practitioners, that's something that only started about 10 years ago. And there are a couple of really, really well-established English-speaking academies that will accredit sophrologists to be part of the International Sophrology Federation. So there's been a limited supply of training. And of course, a limited supply of knowledge, because when something is in one language, it tends not to spread as quickly. So there's an awful lot of French sophrologists. In fact, there's thousands and thousands of them, many, many in Spain and many in Switzerland. And most schools here in those countries will have a sophrologist. The sports teams will have one. They're often in the hospitals. They are in cancer wards, very often used in old people's homes and with dementia as well. So, and also part of childbirth. So it's a technique that's been around for a long time, but it just hasn't made it much further. And of course, now we're moving into a world where mental health is very much at the forefront of our thinking. People are beginning to think about alternatives that aren't just medically based. Now, what's exciting, of course, for us is that longevity is such a buzzword, and sophrology really is the ultimate longevity toolkit.
Yeah, that sounds. Oh, we have to get involved with this, James, won't we? And give this
I
a
think we
give
will.
this
I
one
think
a
we should
go.
champion Sophrologist in the UK. Let's
Definitely.
do this.
100%. So, Lindsey, I was wanting to ask you about what do you feel about the changes over the last few decades with the onset in technology and the impact on human health and psychology? What are you seeing with your clients or in your personal life in a shift? Do you think it's more awareness, or do you think it's a fundamental environmental shift that's impacting people?
Well, there's a number of ways of answering that. And if I tell you what I see first, because that's grounded in my reality, I'm seeing people being massively overwhelmed by data. We currently have access to more information now than we ever have done in the history of mankind. So that's great. We should know everything, be able to do everything, and ultimately be totally perfect and functioning optimally. But I think we all know that that simply isn't true. So I'm seeing people being very, very overwhelmed by information. They're overwhelmed mentally. What do I do? How does my brain work? How do I fix these issues I'm having up here? They become very overwhelmed physically. What should I be doing? What shouldn't I be doing? What should I be eating? How should I be moving? Should I be going to CrossFit? Should I be doing this? Should I be going to yoga? Should I be doing... It goes on and on. And then we've got people feeling emotionally very dead. So as we begin to think all of these things and we spend a lot of time up here in our cognition, we forget that we've got this incredible body attached to us that actually does, if not more than 50% of the thinking and feeling for us. So we become very top heavy. We become this giant thinking head. And I would suggest, and I'm not a research scientist, but much of that shift is what's creating some of the mental health problems. We're hanging out up here, we've cut ourselves off at the neck, and the body becomes merely an accessory. And to get back to your earlier question, that was very much my own personal experience. My body had become an accessory that I dragged around, took to the gym, played dress up with, but I didn't really know it did stuff for me. And it certainly didn't help me feel, or it didn't have access to any intuition or insight. I was just working from my very clever brain. And I think when we talk about things like love, for example, love isn't in our brain. We can't think our way into loving somebody. And for those people who've got children, it simply isn't here, it's here. And I think for me, that was a sort of unpicking. Okay, what is this? How does this work? And as I said to you, I'm very inquisitive. Why do I feel this and you don't? Why does this bother me and it doesn't bother you? Why do you do that and that's okay for you, but it's not okay for me? And that's when I realized I was a whole person. And I think the reason that we need to come back to these practices is because we've just become sort of dissected. And let me give you an example. I'm a road biker. So Zwift racing is an amazing thing. You can go on to Zwift, you can ride any of the course, very, very famous bike courses in the world in your garage. So you're in the garage, you're on your bike, you're sweating, you're visually looking at this course. Your body thinks you've done the ride. It thinks you've been somewhere, but your mind doesn't really compute because you haven't actually been anywhere. So we're in this sort of virtual reality chaos where the body's like, well, I've been sweating and I was doing the turns and I was, doing this on the incline and I was doing that. And your mind's like, yeah, it was great, wasn't it? And then your actual energy body's like, sorry, what's going on here? Well, we've just been in the garage. So you've had no sunlight, no fresh air. You haven't actually been outside riding with any humans. You've just been on your own, although on the screen there were some people. So you're becoming very disorientated. So in terms of what's happening out there in the world, we've got multiple issues. And then we can obviously talk about COVID, and we can talk about the unsettling nature of the world politically, economically, and socially. But we are in new times, and it's not how our bodies were designed to be functioning.
Do you think, Lindsey, that we're second guessing ourselves, just listening to what you were saying, that we've almost abdicated responsibility for our own feelings, that the data's there, all this stuff is available, and like we're now second guessing how we should be feeling. And actually what was intuitive and at our core at one point, we're now going, I feel this way, but the data's telling me something else. And
that's
so,
a really, sorry, James, that's a really good question, because what's also happening is we've got the not only are we overwhelmed with information, but we're also becoming overdiagnosed. So we're putting Whoop bands and Aura rings on people, which is something I love. We're also sending them into very rigorous diagnostic medical testing. So have you got the gene for Alzheimer's? Have you got this? Have you got that? Oh, we're scanning you now. We can see this and that. Let's operate. Let's take preventative treatment. This is great, but there is some human element missing. If I go back to wearable data trackers, and I don't know, are either of you sporting Whoop or a Morpheus or another, or looking at your Garmin data?
What? James is on that. I've used Fitbits and things like that, but I haven't used the Whoop yet.
Whoop is my preferred method because it's easy to wear. It's got interchangeable bands and it stays on. You don't take it off, and it's not got a screen, so it just runs into your app, and then I can check through the interface what's going on with people. I like to say to people that this is a dashboard. All I'm doing is turning on a dashboard in your body so you can see it, and then you can begin to feel it yourself. So if either of you grew up driving a manual car, you might remember when you got taught to drive, you got told to change gear when the rev counter hit a certain number of revs. Once you learn how to do that, you never look at the rev. I don't drive along thinking, oh, the rev counter's hit, whatever, I should change gear. Obviously, I drive an electric car, which does it for me and has no gears anyway now. But do you remember that? You know, you could hear it, you could see it on the dial, and then you knew to change gear. This is what the biometric wearable devices are now doing. So I can say to people, look, we've looked at your data. We can see sleep, heart rate variability, which is the bit that is the autonomic nervous system functioning. We're looking at resting heart rate. We're looking at respiratory rate. We're looking at movement, etc. Here's a dashboard. This is what I can see. Can you see it? Yes. Awareness is curative. So in terms of behavior change, that's the sort of work that I'm doing. James, I don't know if that really answers your question, but the technology is amazing when used properly.
The thing that fascinates me is, like you were saying, the technology's there, it's amazing, and it can give you incredible insight into what is actually going on underneath the surface. But where is that tip over point to then becoming obsessed by it? Then it starts to impact behaviors that you're then thinking, oh, I didn't get a very good night's sleep last night, so what can I do? And then the anxiety starts to, it's almost this self-perpetuating, self-defeating situation. It all comes down to the individual.
Of course.
You know, if you start blaming the technology, it's this inanimate object that's giving you what potentially you need. But the individual itself, it's how they're responding to it. So how do you coach people to engage with these devices so that it doesn't then put them in a worse position than if they didn't have it in the first place, is the question.
I think it's a great question. Education and support and coaching is everything. These pieces of wearable data or wearable technologies are built on algorithms. It is personalized to an extent. And I often have that conversation with clients where they say, I woke up and it was red and I feel all right. I'm like, okay, well, just wait a couple of days. And then I got sick. Okay. Or it was red and I definitely had more sleep than that. Okay, maybe the data wasn't quite right. Maybe the band wasn't tight enough. Maybe it got wet and moved when you were swimming or whatever. You know, there's lots of conversations, but I think on the whole, the data is very helpful if you've then got a toolkit of what to do. What isn't helpful is you buy the wearable, you put it on, your scores are terrible. And then it says, I mean, the app does tell you, you know, do some breath work or do this or do that. But on your own, that's quite hard to do. Improve your sleep, go to bed earlier. Well, it's a bit more complicated than that. You know, you might not be going to sleep early because you've got, you know, an elderly parent living with you, or you might have a disruptive neighbor. And then that's my job to say, okay, how does that make you feel? Oh, it drives me mad. Okay, is it in your control? No. Okay, so what are we going to do about it? And that's when we start talking about, you know, neural reprogramming, we talk about acceptance, we talk about attachment, we talk about all of the therapy things that come up very quickly when we know what it is we're looking for, rather than this just general, I feel terrible. Okay, what does the data tell us? Well, it tells us that you're waking up at 3 a.m. What's that? And if you're a perimenopausal woman, it's normally because your glucose has gone completely doolally somewhere and you've got a cortisol or adrenaline spike. If you're a man, it might be because you need to go to the loo because you didn't burn off the adenosine that you need. I think that's the right way around. Because you didn't get enough daylight, or you went to bed and you hadn't burnt off the adrenaline because you've been in the gym till 11 o'clock. I could go on, but of course that's my job to do that work with people.
Yeah. Do you think that it is a lack of awareness to start with, Lindsey? Because James and I are from personal training backgrounds, and we did that for 10, 15, 20 years. And what I saw with clients, I know how hard it is to encourage change over a long period of time. You can get them on a 12-week program and get them to lose X amount of weight. You see them 6 months to a year later and they've put it all back on again.
Yeah.
And it can be hard to maintain that change because they go back into their environment, whether it's a well-being course or anything that they go on. How do you get that sort of longevity in terms of that human change? Do they have to change their identity or their environment? What would you suggest they have to do?
Well, I think they have to want to change it, because ultimately, if you don't want it, then what's the point? And that's where I always start. And sophrology is a very good method for this. We always start by thinking about how we want to feel. So people will turn up and tell you, I feel terrible. Well, okay, that's a shame. How do you actually want to feel? And fine is flipping incapable of no emotions. Okay is not an emotion. And all right is also not an emotion. So we do a lot of work on emotional granularity. How do you actually want to feel? Well, actually, I want to feel more peaceful or more energized or more compassionate or whatever it is. Okay, then what does that mean on a day-to-day basis? It doesn't mean, okay, sell your house and move to the Outer Hebrides. We're talking about, daily bread. What does that mean today? Well, I really want to feel more peaceful. Okay, great. Let's do a 3-minute breathing exercise. Let's breathe in peace. Let's let go of stress. And then we're scaffolding those daily habits, because what happens is people say, I want to lose 3 stone. I'm going to run a marathon. And then every day I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. But they haven't actually thought about, today I just want to feel more active. What do you have to do for that?
It's too much.
It's way too much, James, isn't it? And then people become very overwhelmed. And then you're back in the situation they were in before, where they've got so much data and so much information, they don't know what to do with it. Whereas I guess when you've worked with clients yourself, when you're there to encourage them, tiny, tiny steps that create that behavior change. So we just scaffold it around brushing your teeth. When you brush your teeth, you do 3 breaths. Okay, great. Can you do that? Yes. Week 1. Week 2. Okay. Did you do those breaths every time you brush your teeth? Yes. Did you write it down with a pen in the journal? I've got a workbook on Amazon. Yes, I did. Great. Before you went to bed, did you do the thing where you feel the sheets? Because we do a 5 senses thing. Yes. Great. So we're becoming aware. We're turning the body back on. So then all of a sudden you begin to think, oh, I'm just sat here feeling my own thing. Oh, this is nice. Oh, I'm back in my body. And actually, as I'm doing that, my legs began to talk to me. I could suddenly feel my skin on my legs, and then I could feel my feet, and I was like, oh, I feel alive again.
Yeah.
Back out, get out of your head, get in your body, do fun stuff.
The essence of it, Lindsey, just feeling more present. I mean, like going for a walk out in nature and observing the trees and listening to the birds singing, and not having these things in your ears and listening to podcasts and being kind of bombarded with stimulation. All that we are just constantly stimulated, aren't we? So I guess that really is about decompressing and disconnecting from that particular aspect and just observing. So I like that when you're feeling like the sheets, if you're getting into bed, maybe plumping up the pillow or doing something that's just going to take you down that kind of route, away from being switched on all the time.
We can't be switched on all the time. And I was laughing before we started the show about my dog. If you overstimulated your dog by, tormenting him, playing with him, walking him, doing stuff, eventually he's going to bite you because he's had enough. And the human body is the same. Overstimulated, it's going to react and say, actually, this is enough now. And then it can't sleep properly. It's like a baby. You've got to have the optimal conditions, nutrition, hydration, sleep, recovery, relaxation, and purpose to be able to make everything work properly. And my job is to help people pull the levers and press the buttons of their nervous system so they begin to feel like, actually, I'm in control of this now. Oh, there's a
Yeah.
sugar craving, not, oh, I'm hungry, I'll eat. Or I'm tired, I'll eat. You don't eat. If you're tired, you don't eat, do you? You go to bed. Oh, I'm thirsty, I'll eat. Well, if you're thirsty, drink. I think we've lost just the basics. Because like you say, James, we're always plugged in. When I say to people, could you go for a walk? Yes. And then I say, how was your walk before bed last night? It was great. Yeah. Did you take your phone? Yes. Okay. Today, I'd like to go without your phone. Well, leave my phone at home. Yeah, it's a 5 minute. You're going 5 minutes out and back.
So,
yeah.
But you're going to get the pushback and that nervous.
Nothing's going to happen to you, especially if we're doing a reverse split. So it's 5 minutes out, walk back quicker. It's less than 10 minutes. Can you be without your phone? What if somebody needs me? I mean, how important are you? It's absolutely ludicrous.
Yeah. No, I like that, Lindsay. I don't know if you've noticed with your clients, Lindsay, but with some of mine, when it came to those type of things like drinking more water, sleeping better, tracking stuff, well, after a while speaking with them and getting to know them, it ends up it was something to do with the relationship with their parents. They've been sexually abused, they've been bullied as a kid, and all of these things I didn't really know how common they were, especially things like sexual abuse. And this was the real reason that they was emotionally eating. They was drinking all the time. They wasn't having sex with their wife. They was, being in the entrepreneur head because they was being bullied of not being good enough. So they're always on this path of needing more money to feel validated. Are you seeing
that void, isn't it? It's filling the void.
Are you 100%. Seeing that some of these things that the tracking is doing is more superficial and they've got some, deep trauma wounds that they haven't addressed, and the tracking's not going to do anything to solve that?
I think it's a really interesting conversation about trauma, and we'll use trauma with a small t, so less dramatic, less illegal things that have happened to people. But we all remember either you were the popular one at school that was in the rugby team, or you weren't. You were the cool girl, or you weren't, or you've had stuff that didn't feel so great in your life, or you had a critical parent, or you had a separation, or whatever. Not to minimize any of these, but we are all products of our experience as well. And when we own those experiences and we're able to release them, acknowledge them, and say, yes, that was quite complicated, but it's made me who I am, then we get incredible change. And the sophrologists aren't in the habit of fishing. We don't go fishing for trauma. But of course, if you see somebody repeating the same behavior again and again and again, you are going to eventually find out why that is. And in fact, when you've got the wearables on, you can see very quickly what's going on. And so why don't you go to bed at night? And it's amazing, actually, just a simple thing like that. Some people are really, really frightened of going to bed because it was an unpleasant experience as a child, or they don't feel safe, or they don't feel that they feel like they're too busy and they shouldn't be going to bed, or they shouldn't be resting because they, grew up without a lot of money and now they feel like they should be working all the time, whatever it is. So the perception and the reality are often very different. And then when we can have those conversations, we can start to unpick and obviously work forwards on, okay, well, how do you want to feel when you think about that experience that you've had? Somebody said to me this morning, which I thought was a brilliant line, and I'm not going to credit it to whoever it was because I can't remember. They had taken it from somewhere else. And they said, do not choke on undigested grief. Do not choke on undigested grief. If there is grief, you are grieving for something. We need to chew it up and swallow it and be like, okay, I've digested that. I've passed it out. It's done. But we allow it to accumulate, and then we become these sort of people that aren't functioning properly because we can't touch, think, feel when we're sort of attached to what's gone on before, or we're so worried about what's going to happen in the future because of our experiences. So I love these conversations. And of course, when we look at our behavior, especially our subconscious thoughts, feelings, and emotions that become our conscious words, actions, and behavior, we can begin to unpick what's going on or what's been going on before in the most gentle of ways. And I have a lot of male clients because sophrology is very process driven. It's very toolkit based. We're not like sitting down on day one and saying, so how was your childhood, John? Did you feel like you were the cool kid at school? Or, we don't start from that point because that's really hard. I don't want to talk about that every day. It just makes me feel sad.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a difficult balance, isn't it, to get it right. It depends if somebody's repeating those patterns all the time, doesn't it? Whether it's Whether they do change or not, there's probably always extremes on that side.
Yeah.
But where do you see, Lindsey, the technology coming in the future? We're talking about AI coaches and AI psychologists, and having these personalized, very like using that data to, optimize and personalize. Or are you seeing people that are very lonely, and connection and love is what they need?
I mean, there's two questions there, isn't there? I already wake up and look on my phone app and see what my Whoop says, and it says, "Oh, you slept really well last night," and then I think, "Oh, great, I feel great." And we're getting to the point where the Whoop will actually say, "And you feel this," because it's checked your stats, and "Oh, you feel la la la." Does it know that? "Oh, you feel ready for romance or what?" Really? I mean, it's a little bit of a far-fetched situation, because we are already in that situation where we think we're being told how we feel, and especially with young people on the internet, they're often, I think, acting in a certain way because they've been told that's how they should be feeling, and it's a chicken and egg. So this is a very uncomfortable place to be. AI therapy, I mean, I spend enough time talking to AI and asking it questions, and I run my own business. Of course, I ask it, what do you think of me, and what's the thing I do best, and what do my clients say about me, and it makes me feel great. Is it true? No, it's just an amalgamation of data that it's got. Absolute rubbish. AI is never going to know, what do James and John think of Lindsey Francis? Well, it's just going to, scrape the transcript, and it's not really going to tell me. It's not going to give me any insights, is it? It's not going to tell me from the heart based on your combined expertise of probably about 50 years plus. So I think we're in a bit of a nonsense world. I want to be with you. It'd be much more fun to be doing this over a coffee, wouldn't it, in the UK, or sitting down or going to the gym, or being like, "Oh, should we just go and go for a run, or have a hike and record this?" But we don't do that anymore, and I think that's really sad. So I know I turn off my computer at the end of the day, and I go back home and I think, I haven't actually seen any humans.
That's 100%. I'm exactly the same. Yeah, and I think it is an issue. I'm hoping that AI and tech, James and I talked about this a lot, liberates us so we can get rid of the mundanity and sort of get back to being human, having community experiences, being outside. My screen time's atrocious. We did that the other day, so I'm not sure what yours is, Lindsey.
I ask my clients to show me their screen time, and because I share my data with my clients as well, I do have to keep on top of it. So I try and use the laptop rather than the phone, because that at least feels a bit like I've got some physical distance from it. I try not to have I never have my phone in my bedroom. I try not to have it anywhere near the table. But then, of course, I've just started using AI for recipes. So now the phone's in the kitchen all the time. What can I make with half a courgette, a tin of lentils, and, oh, look, I found some tofu that's out of date. My husband's like, "Oh my God, that's disgusting." But the recipe was great, because AI is very clever, very, very useful. I think it's a nightmare. And I think the situation we've got with children is just awful. We go to restaurants, or you go on holiday, everyone's attached to their device. And this is not just a Western thing. It's happening all over the world, that we've just suddenly become totally attached to our phones. So if you are an adult listening, you're a grown-up, and you think you are more intelligent than your dog, could you try and leave your phone alone for 10 minutes and go outside without it? Because the reality is people can't.
It's hard, isn't it, James? Hard to do, hey?
That's the algorithms there. So, Lindsey, I'm just listening back to what you were saying right at the beginning, that you were very curious as a child. You'd always be asking why. And I'm fascinated with our journey from childhood to adulthood, that we then stop doing that. We stop asking why. And whether that's through feeling self-conscious, that we don't want to seem stupid, or that we want to appear like we know the answers, that we stop asking why and questions and being curious. Is that something you find in your clients? We lose this ability through conditioning, social conditioning, to actually be that curious like a child. Are we better off being childlike in our adult years?
I think being childlike is actually the solution to everything. If you can be playful and curious every day, then life
grow up. I don't
We
want to
don't
grow.
need to. We don't need to. You know, childlike wonder. We do this sort of work because we like asking questions, because we're curious. If you weren't, you wouldn't bother to be sat here asking me anything. You'd just be writing a book about what you already knew. I mean, I'm a massive fan of play, but I was in the lake this morning in my woolly hat because it's freezing and a bikini, messing about. That's the kind of person I am. The number of eyebrows that get raised and the things people say to me, oh, you're such a kid, or oh, you're such a fool. And I think, yeah, brilliant. I'm having such a good time.
I'm doing the right thing.
Yes. And I can't, I was in Japan at the beginning of the year, and I don't know if you've ever been there with these electric toilets, and I did an Instagram post because if I see a button, I want to press it. So I was like, look at all these buttons. And of course, you're pressing, there's water, there's hot air, there was music, there was actually the sound of a tap running whilst you could press the noise of the tap whilst you were going to the toilet. So this is the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. But why are we not allowed? You know, who said, oh, you have to be really sensible and boring? No, thank you very much. I want to be outside messing around doing.
But is this just a construct from up here? I mean, we'll say that this is society dictating that we've got to appear a certain way, but really it's just coming from up here. This is the perception thing.
Somebody said
it's self-imposed.
We're beige. You're meant to be beige, aren't you, as an adult? Grow up, be beige. Go on the internet, be beige. Do your Instagram, be beige. Use AI for all your LinkedIn posts. They will all be beige. Mine are already beige because I use, you know, because actually I wrote a newsletter the other day and somebody said, oh, I loved your newsletter. And I thought, oh, I hadn't even read it. What a terrible admission. Isn't that? That's outrageous. Well, I didn't read it because I just scraped the transcript, you know, from the, this is awful. So I wrote, you know, oh, I loved what you said. And I was like, yeah. Oh,
go me.
Is that a schooling system thing, Lindsay? Do you think because you're told to sort of, you know, sit in class, behave, be serious? If you don't pass your test, your life's over. You can't really afford to fail. Otherwise, you can't move on to the next level.
I don't know. I think go out and find a sociologist or an anthropologist who'd be able to tell you about the way that we've evolved. Because if we think about Victorian Britain, you know, they weren't having much fun, were they? That looked quite dull. People in the workhouse were probably having a bit more fun playing pranks on each other and doing things. But who is having fun? I think we went to Africa. I watched kids playing in mud huts and parents outside with their children. And I thought they look like they're having a good time.
Yeah.
Rich simplicity, the basics.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it's a sad situation, isn't it?
Yeah, Mediterranean countries, I know Middle East as well, the old people sit outside, they're playing chess, they're playing games. It definitely feels more community based, isn't it? The places where people are living longer, like you said, with longevity. I don't know if you've read Blue Zones about the places across the world where people live the longest, and they've got those common themes where human well-being is optimized. So that community, how do people go about that? Do they just have to come out of themselves and go and seek it out? If your environment's not giving you that, do you have to just go and do it yourself?
Well, you have to go and look for people that want to do fun stuff, don't you? And I think if you see some of these cold water swimming groups, and I've been a cold water swimmer for a long time, it's not about the swimming because you can bear about 3 minutes max. It's about the coffee and the cake afterwards and falling about trying to get your wet swimming costume off without, you know, exposing yourself. And it's not about the swimming. It's about the community. And I used to be a massive CrossFitter. I mean, that was about the competition, of course, because I'm highly competitive. But there was a community there, probably who had the most injuries most of the time. Now I run a road bike and I'm, you know, Ironman 70.3 mad. It's a community, but we're having fun. Do I really care? Well, I don't think I'm going to be the fittest and the fastest at my age. So I think sports and movement is great. But I don't know, John, James, what do you think? Where do you have the most fun playing with your mates?
I mean, there's plenty of video footage of me dancing with my kids in the kitchen, just being a loon. And at any given time, I mean, John and I were doing like morning fitness video. This is how we all started. And it was just like, we were messing around. We were just doing stuff and letting go. I think it's that detaching from the ego of not caring anymore what people think, that you're just able to do stuff. And it's so liberating that you're not constantly in your own head thinking, how am I going to be perceived? What are people thinking of me? It's like, I don't care anymore. Don't get me wrong, there's moments when I do get inside my own head, and there's a couple of these podcasts that we've done that I've started to get inside my own head and everything shuts down. And I start to second guess and I don't speak, and it's some weirdness going on. But I think, like, just again, going back to the dog, it's like playing with a dog. I'm just stupid bloody with a dog. And like nobody's watching.
Yeah.
And just doing it.
John, how about you, mate? In terms of play, I would say I'm always messing around at home, my wife, my daughter. But in terms of connection with other guys, I used to play professional football back in the day. I used to be very connected with big groups. And since I stopped playing, I found a huge disconnection. And now obviously I moved back to London. The prices are everything's so expensive. So now my mind's always focused on finances. I'm pretty much consumed by business, finances, and that community has probably fallen by the wayside. Whereas where I grew up, people used to, I know it's alcohol's I'm not recommending it for people, but a pub thing in London used to be the thing where everyone used to go, whether it be after work or just on a social, just to meet up. Everyone knows your name type of thing. And now it's coffee shops and people on phones. Men especially are probably more disconnected than ever. I don't know if you found that, Lindsey, with your clients.
Yes, I think generally we're totally disconnected, physically, mentally, and emotionally. And men are particularly disconnected because I think we've got this odd conversation around masculinity happening. And I've sort of written and produced a number of pieces where people have gone, oh, I'm not sure you're allowed to say that. Masculine, feminine, energy. I'm like, oh, God, this is a bit complicated. So if I'm not allowed to say that, then what are you allowed to do as a man? And what am I allowed to do as a woman? And the in-between. And then if you're not being your true self, then who are you? And if you're on the internet trying to be somebody you're not, and this is where we started the conversation, of course, if you're not you, you can't be anybody else. You're just lost. And when you are you, you attract the people who you're meant to be with. And when you're not you, you're attracting all sorts of nonsense. I do a great piece of work with my clients called a personal asset review. So they actually have to, it's like doing business assessment. They do a review of the assets they've got physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And we also do a piece of work on who are your people, A-list, B-list, C-list. And, people are really like, can I do that? Yes. If they're not on the A-list, don't go out with them. Oh, it's like we've lost all personal agency. And I think then we just become sort of stay-at-home hermits playing Fortnite and or doing Instagram posts, which I spend hours doing, which is rubbish. It's much more fun to go to the lake and take photos of my friends doing stupid things and then putting that on, or not putting it on the internet, so I want people to see it. So yeah, we are disconnected. I do think it's worse for men. I was talking to a guy yesterday. He runs male retreats in America. He was off to Big Sur in California for the weekend. I think that's a really exciting thing to do. Go and connect, go outside, go on a retreat, get away from your phone, get away from your community, build a network outside, and then go and reconnect. But you need the finances to do it, and B, you need the confidence
to do it. Yeah,
but I do think that sort of thing, if you can go, I was talking to another lady who runs an amazing organization called More Life Adventures, and she said it's all about community building. But of course I was sort of saying, well, what kind of people are there? How competitive are they? Will I be the fattest, oldest, less fit? It's all that noise, like you say, James. Like, nobody's looking at me. Yay, let's do what we like. No one is
fantastic.
looking.
Oh,
yeah.
What percentage would you say then, Lindsey, if you got male to female clients? Does it seem to be more men than women, or?
It's about 50-50. It was more men.
Interesting. Okay.
Which I love. Sophrology is great for men because it's a toolkit-based approach that involves gentle body movement, visualization, meditation, and breath work. There's a toolkit. You have an audio every week. You do the homework. There's a method. We're not having to dig into, as I said, what happened in your childhood. Of course, we still have exercises around inner child voices, past scenarios, but we're very future focused as well. And when they say, when I say, how do you want to feel? And they say, I just want the Ferrari. Like, really? How's the Ferrari going to make you feel? And they're like, well, they give me, then they can start saying, well, it's going to make me feel this, this, and this. I'm like, that's amazing. So here's a cup of tea. We're going to get the same joy out of the tea that we get out of the Ferrari. Do you see how this works? And they're like, oh, does it work like that? Yes.
Yes.
And then we visualize,
What's the age range?
Well, most of my clients actually are over 45. Because I think you can endure quite a lot of pain. I don't work with people with mental illness, and I don't work with children because there is a huge market, of course, for teenagers. But I think people find that they're not in enough pain. It's the grind where you get to where you think, I've got no more energy to do this, and my pension isn't big enough for me to stop. So now what do I do? Or their relationship is falling apart, or they've got elderly parents and teenage children. You're in that squeeze years, deeply uncomfortable place to be. And or you're being fed the menopause story. You're withering up and dying. Lather yourself in testosterone and estrogen from head to toe, go to bed and you'll feel better. Well, actually, you're just entering your wiser years, partially. So there's a gear change. Or, a man is saying to me, oh, I haven't got enough energy anymore. What shall I do? Shall I I have a lot of ayahuasca clients, so I do pre and post plant medicine retreats. I don't do retreats, but you should be doing work before and work afterwards to integrate the experience. And then men are aging and saying, well, I just don't feel the same. Of course you don't. You don't look the same either. Embrace it.
Yeah.
It's hard, but it's hard, Lindsey, isn't it? Oh, shit bags. It's hard.
Really
but it's
hard.
And it's the interesting thing is that sense of purpose, I think, is fundamental, isn't it? That when you lose that sense of purpose, everything goes. It's like, what is the point? I'm getting up in the morning. I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
No.
Why am I on this planet? What's my value? And I think it's that value proposition thing. As you do age, men and women, it's different for the sexes, I grant you, but I think that sort of social currency is a thing. It's like, well, I'm not sexually attractive like I used to be in my 20s, for example. I'm not turning heads like I used to, for example. And that is your sense of self in terms of what that meant to you back then that is no longer relevant. So it's rekindling that sense of self around your relevancy in the relationships you have, your status in the world, and maybe it's carving out a new future for you that was very different to what it was in your 20s, 30s, even 40s.
Absolutely.
So is that part of the work that you do, is to rekindle that sense of self and what your identity is to enable you to then go forward?
Yeah, the fifth pillar of the work I do is called purpose. And that's before planning. Planning is at the very end because, wherever you go, there you are. You can't run away from yourself. So you've got to stop, pause, be present, work out what gifts and talents you've actually got. What is your uniqueness? Because in knowing your uniqueness, you know your purpose, because if we know our gifts and talents, then our purpose is simply to give them away. But if we're not in our true gifts and talents, we're trying to give away something we don't have, you end up in a right pickle. So it's a huge piece of work. And as we get older and people say, well, I haven't got, like you say, the looks, or you don't have the same impact. Maybe it's a special kind of wisdom I've got, or an insight, or an ability, or a craftsmanship, or the ability to create programs for people, for example, which is something that I love as a creative process. Where is this person going? How am I crafting a program using the toolkit of this emotional wealth creation to get them there? It's a deeply creative, bespoke, personal process, as if you're making a piece of furniture for somebody, or you're making them a gift, or you're baking them a cake. When we know our gifts and talents and we give them away, then we're in our true purpose. But that is not an easy piece of work to do on your own.
Yeah. And I found as well, Lindsey, I don't know if you feel the same about how challenging relationships can be for people. I've been divorced. I know, the divorce rate is like 50% plus, rising. You've got the dating apps now, so there's infinite choice. You don't just meet, Sally from the village and Tom get together and that's all you know. You can have, I'm remarried and I met my new wife in Moscow. So it's
There's a story right there.
Anything's possible out there, I guess, Lindsay. But what I'm saying is, how difficult is this game? Because you've got, the relationship with yourself and then the relationship with somebody else in a very fast moving world.
Yes, I think, John, we should definitely put you on the podcast next, because it sounds like there's a story there to unpack, the dating experience and how that worked for you. But yeah, what a horrible world. How incredibly difficult to meet people. And it's the same with the work I do. I can work with a client for months and months and months, never meet them in person. Meet them in person, like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize they were only 5'2" or they were 6'5". You have no idea what you're getting until you get there in person. And I often go to London and meet my clients because I want to see them. I want to touch them, feel them, see what their energy's like. When you go to, when you greet somebody, you shake hands, or especially if you hug somebody, you can feel immediately where their body is orientated, and it tells you so much. So I saw somebody yesterday. In fact, we were doing a shaking meditation, so that was awesome in itself. But when I greet this person, it's almost like full body contact. Like I'm like heart to heart. Oh my God, this person is just, I just feel like so seen and held and felt, and not in a weird way. I'm like, this person's awesome. And then I saw somebody the other day for a drink, and I went to give them a hug, which I prefer to do, even though somebody was in France or Switzerland doing 3 kisses, 5 kisses, 27 kisses. And they sort of lent it away. And I've noticed they do it a lot. I'm like, oh, where's that? There's an attachment issue there.
Yeah,
sure.
Like you say, I don't have to ask many more questions to know that, they grew up in a household where physical intimacy was an issue and that relationships are challenging. And of course, when you've got somebody's whoop data, you can also see, what happens in the bedroom very often, which is very, very funny. And you ask, what are you doing? Whatever. Sometimes it's important to
some alone time.
Yeah. Were you with somebody? Why were you at 3 o'clock in the morning? And of course, that's also revealing when you see people say, I don't drink much. Well, why did your HRV drop 30 points? Why was your heart rate? What did you do at the weekend? Your resting heart rate was like 95 the whole of Saturday night. I'm assuming you're taking drugs. No. You're like, okay, you really need to go to the doctors in that case.
Yeah.
So what I've read, Lindsay, is that with women, they go on the dating apps, they go for the top 10% of men, which are, 6 foot tall. They look a certain way, whereas men are less picky. I think there's probably some, biological thing of why women should be more picky, I guess. But a lot of men are sort of not getting any attention. The very top men are, so it's difficult for them. And then I think pornography has become this silent type of infestation for a lot of probably young boys and men. I don't know if you've noticed any of that or people being honest about it.
People are incredibly honest with me, and pornography is an enormous problem because it's addictive. Anything that gives you a quick hit without you having to do anything is going to get you locked in, and especially if you're using these sort of VR type porn experiences.
James uses those, I think.
I mean, it's one click. I don't think you even have to register. I did check and thought, oh my gosh, this is horrendous. It's a bit like the Zwift racing, isn't it? You think you've been on the bike in Tenerife, actually in the garage. You think you've been in an intimate relationship with this woman, whatever, but actually you're on your own. Your body's very confused then. It's like, oh, now I'm even more. It's like in my head, I was with somebody and they were paying me attention and I was feeling this pleasure because your brain is very clever. The sensation is being generated by your thoughts, not necessarily the touch. It becomes incredibly addictive. And then it skews our reality. And my point to all my clients, and I start all my meditations with this, is you're in the present, right here, right now. Your mind is where your body is. The only reality is where your mind and your body are in the same place at the same time. If you are watching porn, your mind is not in the same place as your body, because your body's on the sofa and your mind is at a strip club somewhere doing something it shouldn't be doing, or whatever. I've got very strong feelings about it, and I think we could also talk about the fact that anybody that's involved in any sort of illegal type activity, taking drugs or whatever, is fueling, unfortunately, an underworld that is not very, very savoury. And Porn is another one. You know, how much ethical porn is out there? Not a lot. How many of these people are actually enjoying and being paid fairly for what they're doing? None. How much trafficking is going on? Loads. So even if you think you paid for your YouPorn subscription and you've used your credit card and you're being quite open and honest about it, you know, you're still contributing to something that really is incredibly hard to control.
It's a cycle of shame, Lindsey, isn't it? Everything feeds into that. You know that it's wrong. You know you shouldn't be doing it, and you're doing it, and then it's how you feel about yourself afterwards. It's all of the above, isn't it? It's all of the above.
The same as, you know, it's the same as eating, isn't it? And I've had various challenges myself where you're hiding bottles of wine, or you're hiding food wrappers, and you can't stop. When you finally talk to somebody about it, you say, look, I'm having this problem, I can't stop, can you help me? Any decent therapist's answer is, yes, of course, here's a toolkit or here's a method, let me help you through that. But it requires, you're right, it requires some honesty, and the shame is massive. Oh, I feel so ashamed. Okay, well, you feel ashamed, nobody else is judging you. I'm not judging anybody for, you know, eating, drinking, using porn, doing whatever. We all do crazy stuff that is not great for us sometimes. The important thing is that we have the agency and the ability to say, I'd like to do something about this. But this back to information overload. Where do I stop? Because everywhere I turn, there it is. I can't get away from it.
Yeah.
What do you feel about the sort of hyper-sexualization of a society? And is things like OnlyFans, is that female liberation, or is that something else?
God, that's a really difficult question, isn't it, from my line of work? I mean, I sort of think we're in a very permissive world, aren't we? Do what you like. I remember, this is an interesting story. So I remember some Christian missionaries telling me they'd been to, I don't know where they'd been, somewhere where there were no mobile phones for a long, long time. They were in, let's say it was Africa somewhere. They went as Christian missionaries. When these guys saw this white girl, they were very rowdy and behaving in a very strange way. And she said, it's incredibly difficult. What's the problem here? And they said, we've just got internet, and the only white women these guys have ever seen are white promiscuous women in sort of porn setups. So they think that you are
this is what you do,
basically a porn star. So they're getting so excited because they think, oh wow, these white women, nobody's explained the fact that this is not, you know, this is not really the norm. So I sort of saw that and thought, where's liberation in that? This is not you know, the world is not all thinking in the same way. What we think is okay in the UK especially certainly wouldn't be okay in some parts of the rural UK, rural Europe, other countries, different cultures, different religions. Is it okay? Well, the question is, if you had a child, would you say that's a great idea?
Yeah.
What is your moral and ethical code? Where does it come from? Do you construct it yourself? Or is it being imposed upon you? How much choice have you got? Is it personal agency? Is it liberation to have, you know, multiple sexual partners throughout your lifetime of all different shapes and sizes, or not? Well, it depends, doesn't it, on what you believe. But what I would say, I think, about intimacy is the reason that we call it intimacy is because it's a deep inner part of ourselves connecting with somebody else. And when we are in an intimate situation with somebody, we're sharing our inner world, and the only person who's in your inner world normally is you, and it should be a very beautiful, safe place to be. And if you wish to share that with somebody, then that's great, but there is an honoring and a deep connection that then takes place that you can't separate yourself from. And I think most people will say they probably remember most of their intimate moments with people, and the reason you remember is because it's a deep, intimate connection. So is there some honoring and some cherishing and some importance placed on that? Yes, I think there is. It's not a lunchtime sport via Tinder because you're feeling a bit sad, angry, hungry, lonely or tired.
Yeah, I agree with you, James. I think it's just everything's so commodified and commercialized now that, you know, I've got a 16-year-old daughter, and I'm fearful of what boys in her age group have got access to, because I know what they're watching, you know, and it can be super dark, and it can and I know, you know, with guys as well, how that can be quite debilitating and not good for their brain. But in terms of the future, Lindsey, where do you see yourself going in terms of your practice? Are you looking to build, or are you looking to get into anything else?
Well, I think it's always a question, isn't it? As an entrepreneur and a founder, how do you scale? And as I've said, I've always been very, very motivated and extremely ambitious. My desire is to bring the idea or the concept of waking people up to the world, and waking them up to what their mind and their body is doing or saying to them, and then using data to help them change that. So in terms of doing that, what I see may happen is that the emotional wealth creation method becomes scaled, that we have PTs understanding how we use this data. We have physical therapists, practitioners using this data, using this window into the world of the nervous system and the body. So we can really start saying to people, look, we've seen that your heart rate is doing this at this particular time of day. What's going on for you? Or your heart rate variability, which is the gaps between the heartbeat, which signals whether you're in fight or flight or rest and digest. It's doing something really strange here. What's happening for you? Why do you think your numbers might be so low? What was happening last Wednesday at 3 o'clock? What happened? I had a client recently. I said, what happened last Tuesday? They said, oh, I was driving. They said, oh, I had a day off. I was like, oh, great. What did you do? And they said, I was just driving my kids around. And I was like, what's going on in the car? Well, they fight. Okay, well, that's just trashed your data. So, no wonder you then had 3 bottles of wine that evening.
Yeah.
I get it. That's really stressful. The traffic, where they were, M25, I'd imagine. So it's those sorts of conversations when we begin to understand ourselves and have a dialogue about it. This is not AI. This is really helpful diagnostic work, because the toolkit isn't fix me. The toolkit is I can now fix myself. So it's very empowering. I'm very excited about it when it's used in the right way. I will just put a plea out. Anybody paying for additional diagnostic testing outside of the NHS, making those decisions, make it wisely. Does your body really want these interventions? Is it really necessary? Who do you trust? Or can you listen to yourself? And I do wonder if we see stuff, especially as we all approach sort of 50 plus, is there something wrong with me? Or am I just looking for things to be wrong with me because actually I just feel miserable?
And I think also, Lindsey, there's this thing in social media that people are setting themselves up as gurus. And depending on who you follow and who you resonate with, is that the person that you really need to be following and taking their lead? Where is the evidence-based stuff? Has it been peer-reviewed? Has this been exhaustively validated where it should be? But again, it comes back to that self-agency. I think that knowing what is intuitively good for you and not being led down a path just because somebody said so. It's, well, maybe I don't feel a particular way. Maybe they're right and I'm wrong. And then losing that sense of self and agency and trust. Maybe we are relinquishing that too much, that actually we should be coming back to how we feel, like I said before, and having a nice additional intervention from an external source that will complement how you feel, as opposed to be completely at odds with how you're feeling and it being jarring and leading you in a very different way. But just coming back to the fitness industry, I think there's this trend now coming back much towards recovery and rehabilitation. I think this is possibly coming into the same sphere that you were talking about, that we're now becoming more mindful of how we're feeling. It's not all about push, that there is this downtime element that we can focus on the pause. That heart rate variability is a nice analogy around when we're going all the time and not focusing on the time when we're not pushing. So the in-between the beats.
Absolutely. Be still and know. The rich simplicity is in the space between the action and the reaction.
In the silence. Just be comfortable in the silence.
And recovery. What's my recovery protocol? What's my rehab protocol? I'm doing. When are you being? Well, I went to hot yoga. You weren't being, were you? Because you're at hot yoga. I was doing this, were you? Meditation, I think, is underrated, and it's incredibly hard to do. But simple, when you're taught very simply, and it involves the mind and the body at the same time, so you can focus. Just taking your own pulse. Take your own pulse and visualize being on holiday. That's all the meditation you need to do. Can you sit there for 3 minutes? How many times did you think about your Waitrose order?
Yeah.
That is as simple as that. I'm not healing anybody. You're healing yourself. I'm just creating the space to help you do it. But I think we're out there looking for a pill. Can I order consciousness on Amazon? No, you have to work at it. What can I buy?
People want the pill. They want that pill.
Don't they just? I love a supplement. I buy all sorts of rubbish, and I really do. I buy all sorts of things from all over the world. But does it make a difference? I was sporting some phototherapy patches earlier. I don't think I've got any on now. They're awesome for recovery, but you do have to stop and they're absolutely brilliant. I can't believe the results I've had with physical health, just that additional energy coming in. But yes, you've got to do the work.
And that's not psychosomatic.
Well, who knows?
It's hard to tell.
Peer-reviewed research paper said not when I spent £150 on them. But sunlight, basically we're just talking about, reflective energy back into the body. It's the same as standing in front of a window or,
Yeah. I would say with guys though, Lindsay, that, there's a lot of guys out there who don't get themselves checked out. They've got lumps, bumps, fucking illnesses. I even went to the doctors the other day and
here we go.
I never say it, Lindsay, but I've got
It's been an hour, Lindsay, before he's mentioned it.
I normally say two things, Lindsay. I was born in a council estate, and the second one is I've got a kidney stone. And it's a big kidney stone, and I never go to the doctor.
It's not your communal garden kidney stone, Lindsay. This is a big old bastard.
An extra special one. Well, do you know what I think we should do afterwards, John, is talk about some sophrology for you, because I think that's really going to help you own where you came from and focus on what it is you really want, because you really don't want these illnesses. You really want to feel, great.
No. That's something we haven't talked about, and we may be out of time, but that's possibly for round 2. But the trauma, so the small t or the large t, not being addressed, which then manifests itself in disease, in dis-ease, and poor health.
Indeed. Moving into the topic of epigenetics, let's save that for another time, because yes, absolutely. Of course. When you don't listen to your body, it does weird stuff. Or when you don't process stuff, it does weird stuff. Or you ignore stuff, it does even weirder stuff. Don't stop listening to your body, because if you do, it's going to shout so loudly, it will be the only thing you can hear.
Yeah.
100%. I appreciate that, Lindsay. And where can everybody find you, Lindsay? Is it Lindsey Francis.co.uk?
France with an E, .co.uk. LinkedIn. You can find me on my own podcast show, Rich Simple Human, which is the most random selection of things, but something for everybody. Nice. And the Instagram as well. So all of those channels. I love a chat. Such a blessing to talk to you two. Thank you so much.
Hey, great to have you on, Lindsay.
Well, let's just quickly finish with John and I met and just talking very quickly about what you said previously, that John and I hadn't met. All of this time we've been working together on LinkedIn, we hadn't met. And we met in person in London fairly recently. And Lindsay, it was such a disappointment. I can't tell you. I built myself up to meeting this guy. We had a hug. I didn't feel anything. There was it was so disappointing.
Well, you know what they say.
You're not the first person to say that, James.
Reality.
I love him.
Expectation minus reality equals disappointment. So lower your expectations, James.
Lower your expectations.
I'll bear that in mind for next time.
With the beginner's mind. You went with an attachment to something. Didn't serve you.
Recovering.
Got something else.
But no, we'll appreciate that, Lindsay, and we'll catch up. We'll catch up again soon. And you take care of yourself. Have a lovely weekend. Hang around anyway, because when we're shut up, we'll be back in the green room.
Thank you
so
much.
Much love, everybody.